Right, I think it's 2 o'clock. Hopefully everybody has joined us. I think we can kick off. So hello and welcome to this video production masterclass webinar. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm sure everyone's got really busy days, so really appreciate you taking the time to attend. We've got lots of people joining on LinkedIn, YouTube and StreamYard. This video production webinar is part of a series of webinars that we're hosting, which are all packed with insider tips. We've got some other great ones coming up. We've got a social masterclass on the 6th of March. We've got a dev masterclass on the 13th of March, and we've got a strategy masterclass on the 20th of March. But first of all, hello, quick intro. So my name's Matt. I've been producing TV ads and short form video content for about 2 decades, working both for production companies and in-house for advertising agencies. I've made tons of ads. I've made ads on low 10 grand budgets all the way through to 200 grand budget productions and everything in between. But I think it's fair to say that I've specialized in sort of cost-effective video production. That includes hundreds of TV ads, video content for social platforms, L&D and training videos. I've also done lots of beauty and product photo shoots, motion graphics videos, animated explainer videos, and good old-fashioned radio ads. And I am also joined by...
Me. Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm the head of creative at Logic and Magic. My experience is in many creative campaigns, branding, conceptual design work as well. I love to tell a good story, and video is a great tool to do this. So I've worked with Matt on quite a few video projects. We have lots of fun together. I hope Matt's not vigorously shaking his head. He's not.
That's definitely true.
We have lots of fun together, and we just aim to create really engaging work and crack our clients' brief as well. So thank you for joining. We are Logic and Magic. We are an independent strategy, creative and technology company. We formerly were Lo and Behold, and we merged with FKC London. So we are now Logic and Magic. We're a team of expert teams. We collaborate together to help businesses evolve and grow. If you've got any questions after today's session, if you've got any production queries or you'd like some advice, please feel free to drop us an email. Our emails are on the screen now. Feel free to get in touch, and we'd love to hear from you. So today's webinar is Secrets from the Inside, a guide for marketers on how to get twice as much video production for your money. We chose this topic because in today's landscape, added value is incredibly important. Brands are continuously trying to maximize the return on their marketing outlay, and value is important no matter the scale of your project. So we're going to be talking about how you can get the most out of your budget, and also different considerations for how that money can be spent, so that when you approach your next video project, you can consider all your options at the beginning. So today's agenda, we've got our intro. We're going to be talking about the 3 Ps. Spoiler alert, they are planning, production and post-analysis. We're also going to end on a summary and a Q&A session as well. So if you've got any questions that pop up as we go through today, note them down. Feel free to ask us at the end. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can. And if we can't get onto your question, we'll follow up with you after as well. So let's get going. Intro. If you're creating any of these video types, then today's webinar is going to be relevant for you. So TV ads, online video advertising, social content, explainer videos, learning and development videos, and out-of-home digital posters. All of our tips that we're going to be talking through today are going to be relevant to you no matter what your project is. We're going to be talking about the production process. We're going to identify areas where clever planning can help you maximize efficiency, and identify how really ultimately you can save valuable marketing budget. We're going to cover those 3 Ps: Matt's going to also give some top insider tips as we go through today. So I'm looking forward to those, Matt.
Tons of them.
Yeah, lots of them coming. And then also we're going to look at some relevant case studies. So we're going to just talk through a few projects where we can discuss our approach and talk about how we adjusted our approach and maximised the budget depending on the client's brief. Bonus, I feel like we need some alarm bells going off. There'll be a recording of this webinar today. We've got that Q&A session, as I mentioned, and we've also got a special offer giveaway that you can sign up for. We'll tell you more about that at the end of our session as well. And you can also speak to us afterwards offline about our inclusive video production packages. So they're ideal for you if you're new to TV brand or if you're doing some social videos. So feel free to get in touch. We'd love to talk to you more about those if they sound of interest to you. The 3 Ps are planning, production, post-analysis. If you get any one of these areas wrong, or you're not planning them well enough, this can lead to inefficiencies during your video project. So they're all really important. However, planning is what we're going to be discussing in most detail today. Usually, the big decisions are made in pre-production or earlier. If you're still making big key decisions about how to approach a job when you're in the studio, then something unfortunately has gone very wrong with your project. So we're definitely going to be focusing in on planning, but we will cover all 3, and all our tips today are going to help you avoid any of your projects going wrong. There is a healthy tension, and I emphasize healthy, Matt, between creative and production, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks, Getty. I think, one of the recurring themes in this webinar is going to be about this healthy tension between creative and production. So, I mean, to massively simplify this is basically the big idea versus production practicalities or production logistics. Or to simplify even further, that's kind of Katie with her sort of creative concept and idea, and versus me with the sort of production logistics side of things. So the secret to a successful video shoot or production is getting this balance right so that neither one dominates. You don't want necessarily a really simple to organize, small scale but boring kind of shoot at the expense of a creative concept that may be needed more. Equally, you don't need to have a massive budget, logistically complicated, VFX spectacular to get across a good creative concept. So that's just something to bear in mind. One thing on this subject as well is that it can be a real advantage to have a production partner who has in-house production, so that creative and production can work as a team from the start. So that's just something to consider when you're appointing a production partner. I've got a message saying the video went down. Hopefully everyone's still here and watching. Moving on to the first of our 3 Ps. So the first one, as Katie mentioned, is planning. And I'm going to kick this off with an interesting stat. So of businesses that don't use video marketing, 15% avoid it because they simply don't know where to start. So hopefully, following some of the tips that we're going to give you in this webinar today, you can avoid being part of that 15%. And this leads us on to what I consider the 3 most important foundations of planning a successful video production. So what are the 3 most important foundations when you're planning? So number 1 is getting the brief right. I can't convey how important this is. The accuracy of the brief will dictate how successful your video production is. It should also state how success should be measured. Whether that's an increase in brand awareness, if it's success is just going to be measured in terms of response rates or an increase in sales. So to use TV as an example, my background is kind of producing TV ads. So to use TV as an example, is it a traditional above the line big branding ad that's aiming to increase brand recognition, or is it more of a below the line direct response TV ad? And with online videos as well, you've still got the same sort of push and pull between response and branding. Obviously there's some differences with online platforms, and we're going to talk about those a bit later. But essentially, any video production, whether TV or otherwise, the brief needs to be clear about the objectives and the desired outcomes. Okay, moving on. Number 2 of these key foundations is timescales. Now, this is a key bit of information that a producer or creative agency needs in order to be able to manage a smooth production process for you. This seems really obvious, but it's absolutely amazing how often this can actually be absent from a production brief, in my experience. So, in production, there is a key relationship between time and money. Less time tends to impact on the production costs as more resources are needed. So maybe you need to hire in more freelancers, more camera crew to achieve the same kind of outcome in a short time frame. Or perhaps there's simply less time available to do deals, to get the best rates on camera kit, to get the best rates on locations and studio spaces or talent. So generally speaking, in production, less time equals more money, and that's going to be another recurring theme in this webinar. You should agree a deadline for your project. So, for example, if this is a TV ad, what's the proposed first air date? For internet and social videos, what's the live date? Are these dates fixed? Are they booked already? Is there any flexibility? This then becomes the key date that everything can be worked back from when planning the production. And when planning that production, you need to get a really precise production schedule that should be drawn up by your production partner. And this must list all the key stages, all the key things that need to happen. So castings, pre-prod meetings, shoot dates, any sort of key editing dates, feedback rounds, final approvals, that kind of thing. And it also needs to be a realistic production schedule. So have some contingency built in, have some slack. If there is mission creep, if things change, things are always changing in production, right? So if things do change during the production, then that schedule needs to be reassessed and updated if needed. Okay, number 3 tip coming. I'm going to kick this off with another stat. So 60% of businesses dedicate 11 to 50% of their marketing budget to video marketing. So this tells us that while video is obviously an incredibly useful marketing tool, production budgets can massively vary, basically. And that brings us onto our 3rd key foundation, which is budget. Now, in my experience, discussions about money and budget, these can be the ones where the client can sometimes be a bit cagey about stating what the actual budget is, or perhaps you simply don't know what it is yet, or you're just trying to find the best deal. But it's so important to try and define it, because creative concepts have to be worked back from the budget. There is simply no point going away and coming up with a killer creative concept for a video if it can't be realized on time and in budget. So if you don't know what the exact budget is at the briefing stage, and there may be reasons that you don't, then at least try to give an indication or some kind of budget range, because this is going to help avoid wasted time developing approaches that just won't be affordable. If a producer knows what they're working to from the start, they can plan and cut the cloth accordingly. Seems pretty obvious, and it is, but it's something that often gets missed out of briefs. Budgets can obviously vary a lot depending on the type of video content you're making. A very straightforward bit of social video content might just be a couple of grand, or a fraction of the cost of a larger TV commercial production. And it can be hard to know how much you might be looking at. And that's understandable. But you do need to try to define your budget so that the producer can work out what approach is feasible. And then the other point here is just about, again, the interplay between time and money. So, number 2 and number 3 are very much linked. So there is a correlation between time and money. Generally, compressing the time you have in production costs you more, as you need more resources to get something done. That said, occasionally the opposite can be true. For example, you might be able to take more time achieving something with a smaller crew, and that can also be beneficial. So just something else to think about.
So, as Matt has said, the brief is a key foundation for the planning stage. But what does a good video project brief look like? There are many templates. We've got our own at Logic and Magic, but every good brief should have these basic key ingredients covered off. So a quick summary of the project. Tell us about the brand. In a nutshell, what are you hoping to produce with this brief? Key objectives. What are you trying to achieve? What problem are you trying to solve? What does success look like? How's it going to be measured? If you don't know this fairly precisely, then you're probably not ready to brief in a video yet. Target audience, media channels. Media channels can affect practical considerations. So, for example, orientation on socials. Obviously, portrait formats are much more popular, whereas TV, it would be landscape. It can also affect how important audio is, duration. So, quite a few considerations based around media. Competitors. What videos are your competitors making? What do you like? What do you not like? How are you going to stand out from the competitors with your video? Messaging. What are the key messages that have to be included? And we'd like to bring through the brand's tone of voice in our script and in our storytelling, so it's really ownable. Brand guidelines, other mandatories. Is there anything that just has to be included? Specific regulatory issues. Really good to include those. And then the two biggies at the end, as Matt said, budget. We've already discussed this. What's the total cost for your production? Is there any budget for ongoing costs such as talent fees, distribution costs, and also timescales and key deadlines? Everything works back from the deadline. So really key bullet points at the end there to finish off our brief. So Matt, you've got some tips for us.
Yeah, so I'm just going to jump into kind of specific planning tips now. So hopefully this is packed full of information. I'm going to whiz through it. So these are tips that you should consider at the planning stage to help keep down your spend and maximize value, basically. So number one is consider the number of actors. So this is obviously a tip related to if you have a live action shoot. But if you know that your budget is tight, or even if it isn't, you should consider limiting the number of featured actors or models. And this is going to help you keep talent costs down. This goes back to that healthy tension between creative and production. So, are there logistical compromises that can be made that will have little impact on the creative concept? So the number of actors in your video can also have a knock-on effect into other sort of costs in productions. So things like wardrobe costs or makeup requirements, even things like travel, catering, accommodation. So all of those costs can increase the more actors you have. So it's really important to look carefully at the concept at the planning stage and see whether there's any roles that can be amalgamated or combined. Maybe it is key to your creative concept to have lots of different actors. Maybe you need to show lots of different demographics interacting with your product or something. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. But just be aware of the implications to the total budget, basically. Tip number two is talent usage fees, getting them right from the start. So first of all, what is a usage fee? We pay actors usually get two fees. They'll get a payment for attending the shoot. That's the shoot day session fee, which is normally a smaller fee. And then they'll usually have a buyout for their ongoing image rights. And, this is because they are unable to kind of appear in a competitor's advert. So you're kind of paying for that ongoing use of the video. And it makes sense to dictate from the start what you need covered off in any talent usage agreements. Don't just think about the immediate need that you might have for the upcoming video. Consider what you think you might need in the future as well, and consider getting that added to any artist agreements or contracts. That can just be as a menu of options. You're not necessarily committing to it, you're just agreeing the fees. Instead of basically what you're trying to avoid doing is having to go back and negotiate with agents or actors later on. So for example, if you're making a TV ad, also have options and fees in there for social media use. Have those predetermined. Don't be trying to go back and negotiate those later. When it comes to talent usage fees, you've got to think about things like territories. So is it just UK activity? Is it worldwide? Media, so is it TV? Is it online video? Is it an internal training video? That kind of thing. Duration of buyouts. So are you paying for kind of 1 month's usage if maybe it's a big TV campaign, and you've got a specific burst of activity that's sufficient? Or maybe you need a longer buyout, like a 12-month buyout, or even longer for sort of ongoing social campaigns. Make sure you get the option to extend written into any contracts. And just bear in mind that you will normally pay a pretty hefty premium for sort of in perpetuity usage or longer sort of buyouts. And that can also sometimes limit the talent pool that you can select from. Also have a think about things like future re-edits, cut downs, use of extracted stills. Are all of those kind of things included? Get those drafted up and written into your actors' contracts. Again, ideally as sort of optional extras, and seek transparency with whoever is employing the actors to see what's included. You know, if that's a production partner, make sure you get to see the kind of terms that they're booking people on. And I just want to talk now about a specific example. This is an advert we produced for a company called OFX, which is a finance company. We actually used their real staff. We filmed their real staff. This was a way of keeping costs down. We also did have a couple of actors. We also shot on location in the client's actual office. We shot stills on the same day. You can see in that bottom left image, we've got a little pop-up green screen, which we used so that we could cut the actors out and put them in a kind of a studio environment. So we're kind of getting 2 locations in one. So, I mean, the main point of this is this was an ad that mainly featured their actual real staff as a way of keeping costs down. And it was a small scale and effective shoot, and ultimately been very successful. Moving on to my next set of tips. This is about clever castings. So the traditional kind of casting approach is that you brief a casting director, or you get your brief together, you brief that to a casting director. They might then liaise with agents. You might need to book a casting studio with a camera operator to film people's auditions and share that with the team. But in recent years, and especially, you know, this has been accelerated since COVID, the COVID pandemic, there's been a big rise in the quality of talent that you can get from online marketplaces. So these are really useful online tools and services you can sign up for, where you give an actor a draft script. They can film themselves auditioning, usually just on their iPhone is sufficient. And then you can kind of filter the results in different ways. And it's just incredibly useful tools. So, you know, use of these kind of platforms can avoid the costs of hiring casting studios. It can possibly negate the need for casting directors. And it can also enable you to get in touch with talent directly, sometimes without needing to go via talent agencies, which can mean, you know, reducing fees in that way as well. I'm not necessarily saying that's always going to be the right approach. Depending on the type of video content you're making, that might not be a good idea. If you've got an ad it's got a really important kind of performance aspect to it, then obviously, you know, trying to hammer down actors' rates as much as possible can be counterproductive if it jeopardizes the quality of the production itself. But if budget is tight, then these kind of online casting platforms can really be invaluable. And they're also great for being able to dictate those talent fees that we've just talked about. So being able to make sure that those terms are all agreed from the start. Okay, my next set of planning tips is all about locations. So much like going through your concept, your video concept, and looking at how to combine or possibly reduce the number of actors if your budget's tight, you should do the same for locations. So with a live action shoot, depending on what you're filming, it can take a lot of time to nicely light, set dress, and block out the action in an area for filming. Moving to a new location in the same shooting days is definitely possible, but it takes time to do, and you know, that needs to be factored into the production schedule. So if it's not critical for the concept to have lots of different locations, then try to avoid making the crew have to pack up and move to a different space as much as possible. This will mean that you can spend as much time shooting content as possible and avoid crew having to de-rig and move on. You know, even if shooting 2 locations in a day, sometimes you can lose like up to kind of half a day's filming just with the de-rigging and packing kit away, moving and setting up again. So basically, location moves, whether that's to a different physical building or to another area within the same space, they are disruptive and they will cost you time. And as we know, when you've got a crew on the clock, time is money. Time is money. That is the recurring theme in this webinar as well. Okay, my next set of planning tips. This is about regulations, and to be honest, this is quite a complex area. It could probably have its own dedicated webinar, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Also, it's a little bit boring. But if you're making a TV ad, then this is going to be extra important, as your script and video will need to go through Clearcast. So, who are Clearcast? They are the body funded by the big broadcasters, so ITV, Channel 4, Sky, and they clear all of the TV ads that you see on your screens in the UK. They work with agencies and advertisers to help get ads on air, basically, and by complying with the advertising rules. So they do this by advising on something called the BCAT code, which is set by Ofcom. And this kind of pre-approval is important because if you're spending a lot of money on a TV ad or a video production, you don't want it to get pulled after it's shot because of something that's perceived as misleading. So this kind of pre-clearance also gives you reassurance when you're planning the shoot. So tip 2 is work back from the rules. So read the relevant Clearcast advice for your product or service before script writing. Before you've even thought about the copy, familiarize yourself with the rules. It's all the guidance is freely available on Clearcast's website. As a top tip, you can download the guidelines as a PDF and you can search for sort of terms relevant to your sector or type of product. But you don't need to liaise directly with Clearcast. Your production partner should do that and should have an existing working relationship with them. Tip 3 is claims. So they need to approve all marketing claims in the script to make sure they can be backed up by evidence and they're not misleading. So claims like biggest, best, number one, those kind of things, they will go through with a fine tooth comb. So if you want to include those in your copywriting, then you'll need to have some pretty robust evidence to back up those claims. Alternatively, if you get bogged down going back and forwards with Clearcast, you can try and include softening words, things like could and should. These can help things sail through Clearcast quicker. And remember, in production, time is money. So the quicker you can get things through Clearcast, the better. You should allow at least a couple of weeks for Clearcast pre-clearance, possibly longer if you're in a sector like gambling or pharmaceuticals where there's kind of more regs and rules. And then you need to allow, at the end of your production, you need to allow about another week for the final video clearance of the finished film. Number 4, I just want to touch on online regulations. So Clearcast obviously approve copy for TV. They also do BVOD, so platforms like 4OD and ITVX and that kind of thing. But with proper internet advertising and social content, regulation is less strict, basically. There's no single pre-clearance body, but you can still have ad complaints and your videos can be pulled by the ASA once they've been posted. So it's a really good idea to check the relevant guidelines and make sure that every advertising claim can be backed up by evidence. And obviously all social platforms have rules and guidelines about what you can and can't post, so you'll need to sort of read through and swat up on those as well. Okay, the next set of tips is about precision and decision. So number 1, be precise. Don't shoot what you won't use. Make sure you get detailed storyboards which break down every shot that you need, and also use animatics. What are animatics? Animatics are basically rough kind of moving storyboards. These can be pretty simple. They can take the storyboard frames and just put them into a sequence with a guide voiceover, which can be recorded by anyone. And it just makes sure that everything is going to fit into your allotted time. So if you're making a 30-second ad, you can plan and know exactly what's going to fit in that time frame. And the use of animatics means that you can avoid shooting more scenes or frames than will fit in your video. The other thing that is important is to break down what's being filmed into a detailed shot list for the day that has predicted times for the start of each camera setup or scene. So being precise will really pay dividends. Number 2 is be decisive. So on the day of the shoot, avoid trying to shoot things in multiple ways if it's not necessary. So I often see this on shoots where somebody wants to try shooting something a different way. And sometimes, it can be useful to have something in the can for future. If you put a lot of expense into a shoot, maybe you want to get a little bit of extra content that you might use in a different way, but that's totally fine. But make sure you've planned that in advance, basically, and that there's no surprises for a director or crew on the day. I have been on shoots where you've been asked to shoot something new or unexpected or in a different way to what's been planned, and it can be quite disruptive to the shooting schedule, and potentially then also have a knock-on effect with crew and overtime costs and things, which ultimately gets passed back to the client. So knowing how to adapt your schedule on the day, or when to simply say no to those sort of demands is pretty important. Obviously, some kind of shoots, you don't need to be so tightly storyboarded. If it's a content gathering exercise or an interview or an event kind of thing, that you won't need to storyboard that, but you still should get that detailed shooting schedule and shot list to help keep things moving smoothly on the day.
So many tips there, Matt. I love it. Keep them coming. I'm pretty sure you will. You've got more for us. I'm going to talk a little bit about an ad where planning was really key in maximising the budget, and that was for men's skincare brand Rockface. Rockface were launching their first TV ad, and they wanted to be perceived as a big brand. They wanted a really slick ad, visually appealing campaign, but on a limited budget. So what do? We constructed a bold narrative. We really dialed up the brand tone to create an ad which oozed brand personality. We got our message across in a really impactful way. Production values were important in creating this cinematic big brand effect that our client wanted. So we had to ensure that we put every penny of our budget to good use. So practically, we ensured that there was no time wasted on this project. We meticulously planned the shoot with animatics, as Matt mentioned, a detailed shooting schedule. We also chose to work with a smaller crew over 2 days, which enabled us to shoot at more locations and get the variety of shots we needed to tell our story and convey that big brand feel. We also added in mountains in VFX to the hiker shot, which was actually shot in Richmond Park, to create a more dramatic backdrop and allude to those bigger production values as well. So let's see the outcome and watch the ad.
Okay, hopefully this plays all right. Don't hide your true face. Don't sweat it. Let it out. Keep it natural. Keep it clean. Show your game face, your rock face. Wash, shave, moisturize, spray. Rock face, no nonsense skincare.
Okay. Moving on to the second of our 3 Ps. This is production. And I'm going to kick this off with a stat. Or a question, rather. So does anybody know what the average cost of a 30-second TV commercial is? I have got the answer prepped here, but just for a bit of fun, I was wondering if anybody wants to pop what they think is the right answer in the chat. I've got 4 options on screen that you can choose from, A, B, C, and D, with some different figures there. If anyone's brave enough to have a go at guessing the answer, please do stick it in the chat, and we will have a look in a sec. Just going to wait for some.
I feel like this is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire moment, Matt.
Yes. Can you call a friend?
Yeah.
Just going to wait a few seconds to get some responses in. Okay, we've got some C's, some B's, another B, some C's.
They're definitely the seem to be most popular.
Okay,
Matt,
I think.
reveal it. What is it?
Okay, let's reveal. So the actual answer is £271,000. Now that is according to Televisual Magazine's annual production survey. And I think we can all agree that that is a huge amount of money for 30 seconds of content. So why am I talking about this? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. That is, do you even need a shoot? You know, do you need all the expense of organizing a shoot? So here are some pros to filming. I've got a little list of pros and cons. So the pros are, with filming, you can obviously create something really unique and bespoke for your product or service. You can show customers interacting with it and demonstrating how to use things. The cons are, as we've talked about, it can be a big outlay, can be expensive to organize a shoot, and timescales. It takes a certain amount of time to organize a shoot. There's a lot of logistics involved. Perhaps you don't have that amount of time. So what are the alternatives to a shoot? Number one is you already have some assets that you're sitting on that you don't realize are really, really valuable and useful, and you could create something new. Perhaps you've had photos of your products taken before, which you can reuse or treat in different ways, or you've had some video content created before that you can refresh or repurpose into a new treatment. So reuse of existing assets is one option. Another option is there is a huge number of stock content available nowadays. There are websites with literally millions of affordable clips, which can be searched online and bought for pretty straightforward royalty-free amounts nowadays. And these can be combined with some motion graphics or treated in certain ways to create striking and original visuals without the need for an expensive shoot. And the third alternative is a purely motion graphics or animated approach. This can save a lot of cost from organizing a shoot, but obviously, depending on the style and the treatment, a lot of kind of animated ads can be costly in their own right. So it's just something to think about. You need to consider the kind of style that you're going for. Another stat, 35% of marketing videos are created from scratch. So that means that the majority are actually created using stock assets and existing assets. And I think Katie is going to just talk about an example of an ad where we did just that.
Yeah, so as Matt said, we used stock assets for this ad, which was for Visit Poland, but we enhanced the stock with overlaying typography, motion graphics, hand-drawn style animations, emojis, which helped to personalize those stock assets, and it helped us to tell our story in an engaging and a fun way. It helped to make the stock assets more unique for our brand, basically, and enabled us to bring through our brand tone. So it resulted in quite a nice, fun little ad. So let's watch it.
Been to Poland? You'd love it. There's Warsaw, really picturesque. Don't forget to look up. Journey north to the famous port of Gdańsk. And when you've done that, you can go to Hell Beach, that is. Go south to gorgeous Krakow. There's great bars and restaurants in its charming square. Or Wrocław, the Venice of Poland, with over 100 bridges. Or trek in the stunning mountain ranges. Not forgetting the traditional Christmas markets. Poland, more than just a destination.
Okay, so if you've kind of ruled out those other alternatives and you've decided that you do definitely need a shoot, here are some quick tips to make sure that you're not overspending. So number one is avoid overproducing. There can definitely be a cultural mindset with video production that you're kind of making movies, and I've seen this with clients who can get carried away, as well as with film crews who can kind of put in those big budget movie demands. So do you need a large commercial style crew to get something filmed? Or can you make do with a smaller scale, more flexible crew, potentially working over more days? This trade-off is often one of the key decisions to be made in production. Number two is about sort of camera kit. So there can be a tendency from camera crews to want the latest and greatest toys, really expensive cameras and lenses. And you can shoot some beautiful looking footage, which maybe is appropriate if you're doing a high-end beauty campaign. That's probably the right choice, but a lot of the time it's not needed. And the simple truth is, you often don't need a large crew with the latest toys. The world of social video content has changed the way video producers should think, and advances in camera tech have also kind of lowered the cost of barrier to entry. So now there are tons of fantastic cinematographers and DOPs who own their own camera kit. So you might not need to hire it through expensive broadcast rental facilities, and you can negotiate great deals with them directly. And also DSLR and kind of more sort of prosumer mirrorless style cameras, those are great tools for filming social content as well. Especially as a lot of social content is consumed on phone screens. So it's possible you can even get away with shooting some stuff on a phone. Use of real locations is tip number 3. So can you use real locations to avoid the need of expensive studio set builds or complex locations? It's almost always more cost effective to bring in camera and lighting kit and light a location than it is to try and achieve the same in the studio. It can also save you money with things like art department and set dressing if the location has already done some of the hard work for you. Number 4 is the use of green screen. Can you use green screen to avoid needing those kind of large set builds and art department requirements, or to avoid needing expensive or exotic locations? And also want to touch on virtual production. There's been a huge rise in recent years of virtual production where you film in front of a large LED screen or volume, and you can see the background imagery in real time, and the light can kind of fall onto your actors naturally and stuff. So whilst there can be some initial outlay with those approaches, they can be great for if you've got a creative concept that's got lots and lots of different locations, or there's kind of other complex location logistical reasons like perhaps weather or the type of location means it's an approach that you should consider.
So an ad that we worked on where we actually proportioned a lot of the budget into post was for multivitamin gummy brand Chewy Bites. Chewy Bites had just redesigned their packaging. They were ready for a relaunch to buyers and consumers. So they briefed us to create a 20-second and a 10-second TV commercials with the same impact as their new lovely bright packaging, with the aim of increasing brand awareness, particularly amongst mums. So Matt's going to talk us through how we maximise the budget.
So this was a very small scale shoot. Basically, we decided to put all of the money into kind of CGI and VFX. So the shoot itself was in a pre-lit green screen studio. We kind of walked in, we did a very, very little set build of just the kind of kitchen worktop that they were sitting behind. And then it was a very, very straightforward shoot. Just shows how you can apportion a budget, you can put money into post, which we did in this example, and that's where we knew it was going to have maximum impact, basically. It's a great ad, fun and memorable. It's had a positive impact on sales, and we've also reformatted it in various ways for different social platforms. So let's have a look.
Right, you fussy eaters, it's vitamins time. Hold on, try Chewy Bites, bursting with vitamins and real fruit juice. Even choosy kids choose Chewy Bites.
Okay. Moving on to the final set of production tips. This is about getting extra value and economies of scale. So instead of spending less, trying to do things as cheaply as possible, can you get more for the same money? So point 1 is about the one-off nature of production. So production is inherently a one-off cost. Make it an investment. Usually you make the video for an agreed price, and then you can spend on an ongoing basis buying the media space to promote it, whether that's a TV ad or buying media space online. But if the production budget is fixed, then it makes sense to get the most out of it that you can. So think about this as trying to get as much content as you can for that initial one-off outlay. Even if counterintuitively that means spending a little bit more, you're going to get more stuff that you can use. So things to consider to get even more value out of a live action shoot are at number 2, we've got photographic stills. So traditionally, stills cameras needed huge amounts of light, so that you had to use flash photography. But modern cameras, the sensors are so much more light sensitive. You can now get great shots using the same continuous kind of lighting that film and TV uses. So to put it simply, it's never been easier for a stills photographer to piggyback off the back of a video shoot. So to jump in after a certain setup or a shot and then grab high-res shots of the same setup. And those high-res shots can then be used in traditional print media like posters and out of home and things like that, billboards. So consider blocking out some additional time in your schedule to get still shot at the same time as your video shoot. I'd recommend doing that even if you don't have press or sort of poster campaigns planned, but it's something useful that you can have for a small additional cost. Also remember that if you're filming on modern cameras, you're probably shooting in at least 4K. You've got cameras now that shoot in 8K. You can probably even export frames for use as stills without the need for a separate photographer, depending on what's needed. Tip number 3 is behind the scenes. So a simple way to get some extra content is to just have a little behind the scenes video shoot. This can sometimes just be employing one extra person to come along and just shoot what's happening on the day. Or you can even do it even more low budget. You can just shoot on sort of good modern iPhones and things, and just create some sort of teaser content before the launch of your main video production. So just getting extra value out of the shoot day. Number 4 is about social content. So in the early days of online video, you'd kind of make it, you'd have a TV ad and you just stick the same thing on social media and kind of fingers crossed, pray and hope it would work there too. Obviously nowadays you need to adopt an integrated approach. So you need to consider how to reformat your video to work across all different aspect ratios and timeframes that you've got on the internet and social platforms. So this can mean shooting the same shots framed differently for different platforms. Sometimes people turn the cameras on the side to get kind of vertical versions. So you might have landscape delivery for YouTube, for example. You might have square delivery for Facebook. You might have 9:16 portrait versions for Instagram and TikTok. So there's a lot of things to consider now with social platforms. So make a matrix. Make a spreadsheet that's got all of your desired deliverables and discuss this with your production partner way in advance of the shoot to make sure everything is planned in properly. Consider shorter cut downs too. If you're making a 30-second ad, get a 20 and a 10, maybe even a 5. Get these versions made at the same time for economies of scale. Often creating shorter cut downs can have a pretty minimal impact on the overall cost, but give you much needed extra marketing ammunition. And then the last tip is about voiceovers and subtitles. So you also need to consider how your content will work without audio. Does your creative work without sound? Can added captions convey the concept? Do you need subtitles, which can be pretty easily auto-generated in most editing software now? And to enforce this, I have an interesting stat, which is that 83% of videos on the internet are watched without sound, and that rises to 92% of people that watch on mobile. So you've definitely got to consider how your content is going to work without audio nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. Some of Matt's production tips that we put into practice for days filming for Superdrug's beauty studios social channels with their mascot Biscuit, who is this lovely dog character. Disclaimer, that's not me in the costume. We had pre-planned the 2 stores that we were going to film at, so we'd already had approvals from them. They knew when to expect us. We had our shot list, which ensured that we maximised what we could capture within our time. Everything was shot on iPhone, which kept costs down and also translates well for that organic feeling on socials anyway. We shot extra videos and extra stills as well to be put into a brand asset bank so that we could use that for any future content. Our primary output for the day was a video for World Kindness Day, and as Matt mentioned, we used captions for accessibility. We also considered safety areas, things like that, for the different platforms when considering our layouts. So that leads us on to the final P, which is post-analysis.
Yeah, so this is probably the shortest section because most of the hard work's been done by now with your sort of production, but there's a few things to look out for once your video has been shot or created. And the first of these is collated feedback. So approvals and review. collated feedback will avoid unnecessary amends. Get everyone who's got an opinion on a video, get all their feedback, collate it into one, and then relay that to your production partner. Consider the use of review software. There's now some brilliant review software which can help give feedback more easily. So you can kind of give time-coded comments or even draw on the frame and make notes directly on the video frames. So consider those tools as well. Tip number 2 is keep optimizing. So you finish your video, that's great, but don't put your feet up yet. Keep testing it, keep optimizing, keep re-editing, testing it to improve performance, especially if it's kind of a response-based activity. Tip number 3 is just a very quick tip about delivery costs. So don't get stung for distribution costs at the end of a job. There's often a cost to send something onto a TV station or to an online platform. Make sure those have been factored into your production costs from the start, or you've been made aware to keep some budget back for those, because they can range from a couple of £100 up to a few thousand for larger campaigns. So just something to consider. Right, we've pretty much reached the end. So I'm just going to give a quick summary. So we've looked at those 3 Ps: planning. The 3 planning foundations were the importance of briefing, budget, and timescales. Those are really the key things that I would love people to take away from today. We talked about talent and castings, locations, regulations, and precision and decision. On production, we talked about whether a shoot is needed, some alternatives, how to avoid overproducing and economies of scale and getting maximum value. And then we've just talked about the importance of collated feedback, which I really do think is critical, and the importance of keep optimizing and testing and refining your creative. So thank you everyone for bearing with us. I think we're going to have a quick Q&A session. If anyone has any questions that they want to put in the chat, feel free and we'll try and answer them, or follow up offline if we can't answer them on the spot. Don't be shy. Anyone got any questions? I'll just wait a few minutes, see if any come in.
Yeah. One's come in, Matt. Somebody's asking, what are the implications of AI in video production?
That's a great question. I think at the moment, AI is good for kind of, it's definitely mainly used for single images. Getting movement into AI videos is still proving kind of tricky. It's definitely like there are some amazing tools coming out, but I think they are very much tools at the moment rather than kind of a replacement for anything.
Yeah.
I think last week OpenAI released their new Sora software, which looks like it's going to be very interesting text to video generation. So watch this space. Lots of exciting stuff happening with AI, but I feel like it's not a day-to-day useful thing yet in production. Okay,
interesting.
Any other questions? How do you make sure your concepts are achievable? That's probably one for you, Katie.
Yeah. So what I would say to that is 2 things. One, hopefully, as we've said, hopefully there is an idea of the budget at the brief stage. And then before we present any creative concepts back to the client, I'd always go and talk to Matt. So just to ensure that I don't get shouted at by Matt for presenting
I would never shout.
Wildly outrageous concepts back to the client that are totally unachievable within their budget. I always talk to Matt, which is why it's really nice that we're both we've got both teams within Logic and Magic. So talk them through with Matt, see what he thinks is achievable as well. And then that way we've got the confidence to know that what we're presenting back to the client is has already been tweaked and adapted as necessary for the budget. So that's what I'd say to that one. We've got another question, Matt. How long does it take to make a TV ad?
That is a tricky question to answer, to be honest. But I mean, obviously, a huge caveat that it depends on the idea. I'd say typically you want kind of around 8 to 10 weeks would be a comfortable schedule. You need to factor in that time that I've talked about for Clearcast. You know, that can be 2 or 3 weeks of that time. And also the kind of final delivery of stuff to station. So I'd say something like 8 to 10 weeks is sort of a typical and comfortable amount. Can be compressed a bit, could definitely be longer if it's a more complicated idea.
Sure. Okay. Got a few more coming in.
Any more questions?
There's one here that I could answer. Do you come up with different concepts for different media types and platforms? So concept-wise, sometimes trends can influence ideas and how people engage with different platforms. For example, out of home, socials, you've only got a second or two to capture somebody's attention before they scroll past or walk past or drive past. So with those sort of media channels, simplicity is key. A good idea should be able to be communicated with minimal words anyway, with 1 or 2 key visuals. So I would say bear that in mind with those sort of channels. A nice rich campaign idea should be able to flex and allow for different content across different platforms. So you might want to do TV cut downs, as Matt said earlier, for socials, or you might create totally different activity, for example, using UGC, which might be more suited to that platform, but it could all sit under one campaign concept. So it depends, but it's definitely good to consider a platform's benefits and also the audience's mindset when they are viewing your ad as well. So that's what I'd say to that.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, Katie, so unless any other questions in imminently, I think let's just quickly do some shameless plugs. So firstly, we've got our free video tips guide. Follow Logic and Magic on LinkedIn. You can use this QR code to find out more about us and the webinar series. Like I mentioned at the start, we've got some other upcoming webinars from the Logic and Magic team. So that's including our social masterclass. That's about the risks of of using a social marketing apprentice for your business. We've got a dev masterclass on the 13th of March, how not to fall off Google with your new website. We've got our strategy masterclass on the 20th of March about why it's time to burn the annual marketing plan. And you know, if you're interested, please do speak to us about our all-inclusive video production packages. We've got some fixed production packages. These are great and ideal for people who are new to TV or new to sort of social video. So please do get in touch with us about those. So just time to say thank you very much, basically. If anyone wants to reach out to us, if anyone's got any production questions, any geeky production questions that I haven't answered, please do feel free to reach out. Our email address is there on screen.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully you've got some really helpful tips from Matt. I'm sure you have. But yeah, we look forward to hearing from anyone that likes to follow up.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.